And welcome to No Story Stagnates with me, Ernie Boxall. And today it's my pleasure to introduce Steve Bateman. Steve, will you tell everyone who you are, where you are, and what you do, please?
Yeah, thanks, Ernie, for having me. My name is Steve Bateman. I'm based in the UK, in Wokingham, near Reading. And what I do happy spreadsheets. So I save small businesses hours of time by transforming messy data into straightforward data that can be handled with a happy spreadsheet.
That's wonderful, Steve, because you're talking to someone who's got a little bit of a phobia about spreadsheets. So we'll probably talk about that later. But as you know, Steve, this is not necessarily about your business.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be about taking your life story from before you were born, hopefully, to where you are now and the lessons that you've learned in between. So the first question I ask all of my guests, Steve, do you know how your mother and father met for the first time?
So the story we're told is that they were both born and brought up in a part of Bristol. And there was a youth club in that part of Bristol where they used to go for dances. And they met around the edge or across the dance floor.
Absolutely. I remember youth clubs and boys clubs myself. Were you ever a member?
I did go to a youth club. By that time, the youth clubs weren't arranging dances. That was a bit later on.
Yeah. Lovely. And that's a great story, Steve. And are your parents still alive or?
My father is. He's remarried. My mother died in, I think, 2002, if memory serves me right.
Yeah, okay. We'll come to that period later. So, Steve, from the years of 1 to 10, a story which comes straight into the mind as having a real impact on you, and perhaps a lesson that you learned then that you're picking up now.
So 1 to 10. So that's junior school, infant and junior school. Probably my most, the memory that comes back to me is of learning to play the violin.
Right.
I can remember being sat in a junior school and we had assembly. We used to sing, the whole school would sing songs, and there was a school orchestra. And rather than looking at the words upon the wall in front and singing the songs, I was just captivated by the kids that were playing instruments. So I asked my parents if I could learn, and from the ages of about 8 to 14, I did learn and study the violin.
Yes.
And I actually got to grade 6, music-wise.
How many grades? What would be the grades?
There are 8 grades.
Right.
So that's a fairly advanced level. Now, I haven't played the violin since age 14, but it has served me well musically. And I think it also served me well in terms of I really enjoy music. I enjoy relaxing to it. You can often see me driving along in the car with music going loud, singing along to it. And it's just a fantastic way to relax.
Yeah. Now, I've got a good friend who owns a recording studio.
Mm-hmm.
And his daughter, it's not that he didn't force her to play the piano. She wants to.
Yep.
But every morning, their regime is she gets up, grooms, and then she comes straight down before breakfast and she will play for 20 minutes. Was it like that with you?
Very similar, very similar. I can't remember. I can't remember playing in the mornings, but I can remember coming in from school and before going out to play with my friends.
Yeah.
I had to put in some violin practice, whether that be a half hour or an hour.
Yes. Now,
So,
I remember playing, I started around about 15, 16 with classical guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, before you went out with friends, but it may have been the same for you. I remember I would pick the guitar up, I'd start to strum, and then suddenly an hour's gone. And, and the time seemed to fly by when I was doing that. But what sort of, when you say it's brought you love of music, all music, or is there a particular type of music?
For me, at least, it's all music.
Right.
I like classical. I like Well, my favorite bands probably for the last 4 or 5 years, Muse. They're progressive rock.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
Basically, if there's a good tune, I can sing along to it, and
Yeah.
I can kind of hear the harmonies, then I just really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. I think similar to me, but the first music that really caught me was in junior school. I think when we were about 8, 9, or 10, and
Hmm.
the teacher put the Planet Suite on. I was
Oh
into
yeah.
writing then. I was into writing, so she put Mars on, and she said, "Now write a story from the music." She didn't even tell us what
Yeah.
it was, but I thought, "Yeah, this is." And then she told me that's a classical piece of
Yeah.
music, and everybody was saying, "Well, we're into Tommy Steele or you know, the King."
The rock and roll, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I thought I quite enjoyed that, and I think
Yep.
that's taken me through. So that's the story from 1 to 10, Steve, and
Hmm.
it's carried on now. When we get to 11 to 20, I like to sort of break it up because I think there's two periods of your teenage years.
Yep.
So 11 to 15, 16 to 20, a story from each period and the lesson you think you picked up from them.
So I'm going to come back to music again.
Okay.
From 11 to 15, I actually stopped playing the violin, and I taught myself to play guitar.
Right.
I don't think I'd have been able to do that without all of
No.
the study that I put in on the violin.
Yeah.
And from there, that led me to join a band at school.
Yeah.
And we were a cover band. We played Beatles. We
Right.
played all sorts of different songs. But
Yeah.
fantastic, just to be part of a group of people that were actually making music together.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got to laugh because I was also in a band.
Oh yeah.
I was bass player,
Uh-huh.
but we were doing one gig when the lead guitarist string broke. We hadn't brought any. We hadn't brought any spare strings. So what we'd been doing was practicing miming.
Hmm.
So somebody got a record player, put a couple of records on, and we mimed to it for the rest of the gig. We still got paid, but it taught us to take spare strings along to a gig.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Think about what could go wrong as well as
Yeah,
what goes right. Yeah.
yeah. And so, how about a later story?
So 15,
Late
16
teens.
to yeah. So late teens, I stayed on at school. I did A levels.
Yeah.
And then I had a place lined up at university, but I didn't take it up. Girls. So I wanted to
Right.
stay in Bristol and not go to York.
Uh-huh.
But what I did do was go out and start working for an insurance company as an insurance clerk.
Yeah.
And they had a personal computer right in the middle of the floor with all the clerks on.
Yes.
And you had to book time on this computer and take along your floppy disk and put your
Yeah.
disk in and run the program and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember getting really, really curious about how computers worked and what you could do with them and whether you could program them. So I went out and bought a BBC Micro,
Right.
started programming.
Yeah. Yeah. And while you're doing that, let's try and go back a little bit. You talked about girls. So
Yes.
the time in Bristol,
Yep.
hobbies. What were your hobbies? What did you spend your time doing?
So playing guitar.
Yeah.
I also was a swimmer. So I
Uh-huh.
belonged to a swimming club for a while. There were obviously girls and girlfriends.
Yeah.
Um, um, and that's probably about it, actually.
Any walks along the beach or any strange happenings on the beach at Brighton?
The nearest beach to us was Weston-super-Mare. We used to
Right.
call it Weston-super-Mud
Yeah. All right.
because it was it's a beach on the Severn estuary, and
Yeah.
all the mud and the silt coming down the Severn kind of wash
Yeah.
up, and you can't really get to the sea. So
Right.
so we probably went there a couple of times, but no
Yeah.
major memories of going to the beach or anything like that.
Right. Right. So it was basically playing in the band. And did you get gigs?
We had a couple of gigs, and then I don't know, for some reason the band broke up. We
Yeah.
stopped playing.
Yeah.
I can also remember going to concerts,
Uh-huh.
nightclubs,
Uh-huh.
a bit of nightlife in Bristol.
Yeah.
And that was the period when I got into heavy metal. And so I
Right.
started listening to Led Zeppelin and
Oh, yeah.
going along to nightclubs that offered heavy music. So a bit of
Yes.
head banging as well.
That was my era as well, although I was a bit before that as well, but certainly I was into
Yeah.
Zeppelin and groups like that. Yeah, AC/DC came along. And, yeah, but particular, there was a group in America I listened to called Schizopathic.
Never heard of them.
Nobody ever heard of them, no. But they were really, really heavy metal.
Yeah.
And so you're at university now, HD, but late 20s, late 18, 19, 20.
I
No, right.
didn't actually, I
Didn't
didn't
go.
go to university, no.
So you stayed in Bristol instead of going to York and just.
Yeah, so rather than go to York Uni, I started out in insurance.
Yeah.
After about 4 or 5 months, I'd encountered PCs and started to get into computers.
Yeah.
So I applied for a job at a small company north of Bristol as a computer operator.
Uh-huh.
And part of my job there was to separate the printouts because they used to come out in 3 or 4 part paper.
Yeah.
And it used to be kind of bigger than A4 size, all like an accordion together.
Yeah. I remember
And
that.
the printouts had to go to different departments. So first thing in the morning, you'd have a big stack of paper and have it, separate it and put it into the distribution boxes and so on. But there as well, I had an opportunity to learn more about programming and start to get into some actual systems programming.
Right. Yeah. And would that take you then into your 20s to 30s? A couple of stories from 20 to 30.
So that would probably take me to 21, 22 when I joined Hewlett Packard.
Uh-huh.
Let me see. So from 20 to 30, 84 to 94. So I met the woman I'm now married to, Jane.
Yes.
I met her in 89.
Uh-huh.
She was a student in her third year of her degree, and was in Bristol for a placement year.
Right.
Living with a couple of other people that were also on placement year in Hewlett Packard, which is where I worked.
Right.
So a bit of socializing. We got to know each other.
Yeah.
And she then went back for her final year, but we kept in touch, and I used to travel up and down to see her. And in 92, when I was 27, 28, we got married.
Right. And that I guess that might be a question. Do you have children, Steve?
I have a son who's now 26 and a daughter who's 20. So
if your son came up to you and said, "Dad, how did you and my mum meet for the first time?" What would it be?
So for the very first time,
I
was in the middle of Bristol on a night out with the work crowd. And Jane came into the bar where we were drinking with the people that worked and lived with her, but worked with me.
Yes.
I don't actually remember much about meeting her for the first time because I'd already had a few too many pints, unfortunately. Right. I do remember, and in fact, she tells me that I did make a point of coming and sitting next to her,
right,
but that she couldn't make much sense of what I was saying either. So we met again under different circumstances about 5 or 6 months later, and that was much more productive.
No, that's right. That's good. And that's middle to late you got married? Your 20s, was it?
So I'm about 20. Yeah, I'm 28 when I was married, or 20, coming on 28 when I was married.
And was it easy? I mean, had you accumulated the money to buy a house or go in?
Yeah, so I was living in a house that I'd purchased half and half with my brother. And his wife when I met my wife.
Right.
And then my wife and I managed to get enough money together to buy out my brother from his half of the house. So we had a house in Bristol.
Right.
So yes, I did have enough to have a place to live.
And a car.
You needed. It was at that point it was a blue Cavalier. Ooh. With a gold Go Faster stripe on the side.
Yeah. Wow. Driving around Bristol. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you commute into Bristol, or was it not that far away to Hewlett Packard?
No, Hewlett Packard was based in North Bristol, in a place called Filton, and we were living in Stoke Gifford, which is right next to Filton. So.
Okay.
We can actually walk or cycle to work if we wanted to.
Yeah, it wasn't one of these long train rides that people do.
No.
Nowadays. No. Right.
No.
Okay, Steve. So we go 30 to 40 stories and lessons.
So at the very end of the previous decade, 20 to 30, 93, I was working for Hewlett Packard. My wife had finished uni and was working for HP as well.
Yes.
And the job that I was working in gave me the opportunity to go on a round the world trip, demonstrating a bit of software to other parts of HP. And as a result of that, a guy in the States noticed me and said, "Do you want to come and work for me?"
Okay.
So in 93, my wife and I moved to the US.
Brilliant.
Where we were for 4 years. In fact, my son was born out there.
Yeah. Oh, dual then. Yeah.
He's got dual nationality. Yep. He's English and American.
Whereabouts in America?
Silicon Valley. So, so we stayed in a place called Mountain View and then Sunnyvale and San Jose and so on. But so literally 40 minutes south of San Francisco.
Yes. Yeah.
So a fantastic place to live in. It was really exciting. Lots of people coming in and lots of companies growing at the time, and perfect weather and all that kind of stuff. Really, really good experience.
And through all this time again, Steve, even 20s, 30s, then are you still playing music, or have you picked up another hobby? Or
no, I've stopped playing music. I am still programming. Which is I just enjoy making little tools and little things and so on. One of the things that I do recall about being out there was coming across spreadsheets for the first time.
Right.
And I came across, I used to work in Lotus 123, which was a competitor to Excel.
Yeah.
And I do remember a fair bit of traveling. And there was a travel expense form that we had to fill out when we returned from each trip to get your expenses reimbursed. And I thought this was just a waste of time having to write it all down on the form, then add things up manually. So I reproduced the travel expense form in Lotus 123. And eventually, other people asked me if they could use it as well. And eventually, it got taken up by the corporate travel department in the US.
Yeah.
Who made it available to other travelers. And I don't know how many people were eventually using it, but as a reward, my wife and I got travel vouchers, which we used to go see Washington, DC.
Yes, yeah. And
so
where did your son come into all this? He'd just been born. Was he traveling with you?
So when we went to DC, my wife was pregnant with Joe.
Right.
And then I think the role that I was in, I changed roles so that I wasn't traveling so much. So for the first couple of years of his life, I was actually spending more time with my wife and with him.
Yes. Yeah. And then how old would we be when he started to show his own independence, sort of thing?
Well, that was as far as we can recall, that was from day one.
Right.
He was quite placid. He did enjoy sleeping, so we got good night's sleep. But he was always quite independent and wanted to explore things and figure things out and so on. And we actually moved back to the UK when he was 2, so that his grandparents, who were all still in the UK, could actually get to see more of him.
Yes. Yeah. Now I know that when I go to America, most of the houses that I have sort of stayed in have got huge back gardens and stuff, or they're out in the countryside. What was Silicon Valley like in terms of your location?
We lived in a couple of apartments, and then finally, I think the last year we were there, we rented a house in Sunnyvale that had quite a small back garden because. At that time, it was getting really busy. They were building everywhere. It wasn't kind of a huge spread or anything. It was quite packed in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
But Joe enjoyed it, playing with water in the back garden.
Yeah. How close is Silicon Valley? Close to the beach, the shore?
Yep. If you leave Silicon Valley and head for Santa Cruz, it's about a 50-minute to an hour drive.
Right.
You go up and over the mountains, the coastal mountains, and then you're in Santa Cruz. Or you can go 40 minutes north to San Francisco, and there are a couple of beaches there as well.
Of course, yeah. Was it Golds or something like that? Yeah. And did you do that?
I can't remember the name. But, Funny enough, when you live somewhere, you
Ah,
don't tend to spend a lot
right.
of time touring and seeing places. It's almost like you work during the week
Yeah.
and you don't get much time in the evenings, and then on
Right.
weekends you want to see friends and just relax. So you don't go off and tour and see
Okay.
places. But we did manage to get, a few visits to the wine country.
Uh-huh.
We had a couple of trips up to Lake Tahoe, which is on the border with
Nice.
Nevada, and it's a
Yes.
great ski resort.
Yeah. Did you do
And
any
then
or?
we did, we did.
Yeah.
We learned to ski out there, myself and my wife.
Right.
Joe was a bit too young, unfortunately. He was
Yeah.
only just under one last
Yeah.
time we went skiing out there, I think.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah, it was great fun.
have you kept up with the area at all?
We still have, I don't know, 4 or 5 different sets of friends out there, and
Right.
things like Facebook make it
Yeah.
really easy to stay in touch.
It
So
does.
yeah, and we've been back a few times since moving back to the UK with our kids at
Yeah.
different ages to visit friends.
And as a lover of the United States, and you talk to your friends, how are they find?
Mhm.
I'm hearing things about California in general that are not so good as they were.
Okay,
Okay,
I've
right,
I've not
okay,
I've not heard that from my friends.
right.
No.
Talking about high taxes, very high
Hmm.
taxes, and
Okay.
the governor. So your people are happy there.
Well, let's put it this way: they haven't passed on that kind of news to Jane and
Okay,
myself.
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. So I'm tempted to ask how old you are, Steve, but how far do we have to go up?
So moving back to the UK was 93. So I would have, no, 97, sorry.
Yeah,
I would have been 33, 34.
right. And had you learnt any lessons in America that you brought back with you?
I think I mean, the main lesson for me was if you do a good job, and if you care about what you're doing,
Yeah,
um, you will get noticed. People will appreciate what you're doing, and you will get asked to do things that probably if you weren't doing such a good job, you wouldn't
right.
get asked to do. I mean, the travel spreadsheet was a case in point. I did
Yeah,
it for me,
yeah,
so I
yeah,
could save time, but other people found it useful
right.
because I'd put a lot of effort into making it right for me.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I was on a webinar this morning with a guy called Peter Thompson, who I follow,
Hmm.
and he held a little card up that said, in the beginning, you'll get very little money for a lot of hard work, so that eventually you'll get a lot of money for very little work. And I think that sort of, you put all that hard work in
Yep.
creating, and then you don't have to create it again.
So going off on a tangent from
Yeah.
that, I mean, you can put a lot of hard work in, but I think one of the other lessons I learned was just be curious.
Uh huh.
Follow your curiosity. I mean, the putting the travel spreadsheet together was nothing to do with what I was employed to do
Right.
by Hewlett Packard,
Yeah.
but it was something that I wanted to explore and wanted to find out about and wanted to put the time in on my own time to
Yes.
make it work for me. And all of a sudden it started to work for others. And I think throughout my career, I've found that if I'm just curious about things and maybe investigate when I don't really need to,
Right.
I actually end up learning things that come in handy later on.
Well, with that in mind, then, Steve, are you someone who would you rather spend time indoors reading or learning, or outdoors walking, hiking, getting fit?
I like both, strangely enough.
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily choose to go
Right.
outdoors to do kind of walking around and so on. I do get a lot of satisfaction from reading, studying, finding out about things
Yeah.
indoors.
Yes.
But I'm a fairly healthy guy. I run,
Right.
and in fact, running for me now, we're probably skipping ahead a bit far, but running for me is a great opportunity just to kind of relax, zone out, and think about things.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's go back to we just got to sort of, was it your 40th year?
Between 30 and 40. Yep.
Yeah. And so
So
carrying
the
on from
end,
there.
the end of that decade, 2002 was when my mum died.
Right.
She'd been ill for I don't know, 20, 25 years with
Yeah.
multiple sclerosis. Which for somebody with multiple sclerosis is
I was going to
actually a
say,
long time to live. Yeah.
absolutely, yes, yeah,
Her sister also died from multiple sclerosis, but it from the point of being diagnosed to the point of
yeah,
dying, more like 4 or 5 years for her
yes.
sister, whereas my mum lasted years and years and years.
And do you put that anything down to anything?
Um,
Resilience or
uh,
positiveness?
I'm gonna characterize my mum in a certain way. I'm probably not here the last of it if my
Right,
sister ever watches this, but I'm going to put it down to sheer bloody mindedness.
right.
If you'll excuse the French.
Yeah. Mine
She
was the
was
same. Yeah,
she was the sort of woman that would set her mind to something, and she would follow through regardless,
yeah,
whether it was budget, but house finances, whether
yeah,
it was sewing, making things for herself, whether it was raising us in the right way.
yes.
She was very, very focused.
Uh-huh. It reminds me of my mother. She'd been in a care home for about 3 months, and we'd go and visit her, and she'd be on a bed lying flat, and they'd hydraulically lift her head,
Mm-hmm.
put some tablets in, and then bring it back down again, and we wouldn't hear a word from her. She wouldn't speak at all.
Right.
So I went in one day, and they just lifted her head up, put it back down again, and I whispered, I said, "Ma'am, Dad's waiting for you. It's time to." She suddenly said, "I'm not ready yet." It's the first word she said in about three months. That I'm not ready yet. No, ma'am, to a
Yep.
T. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Sounds
So
very much like mine.
uh, I'm tempted to ask the effect on you, but don't go there if it's
No, I
too
mean,
close.
my wife tells me that I'm very much the same.
Right.
That if I do set my mind to something,
Yeah.
I will achieve it. I will make sure that I try my best to get it done.
Yeah.
And quite often, I can kind of step back from family conversations that are happening, and then just interject something at a certain point. And
Yes.
my wife and my kids look at me like, "All right, Dad's spoken."
Uh-huh.
And he's very, he doesn't actually say much, but when he does say it, you need to, take
Right.
note of it, kind of thing.
Yes.
And that's very much the way my mum was.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And is your sister similar?
She's no, well, I don't know. She's probably a mix between mum and
Right.
dad.
Yeah.
So she's definitely more on the touchy feely side than I am.
Yes. Yes.
I'm a person that doesn't really hug easily.
Right.
I've got a third brother who's a bit like me,
Yeah.
Jeff. And then Rob, my youngest brother, is again more like Claire, my sister. So he's a bit
Right.
more on the touchy feely side. So we're
Yeah.
we're kind of a mix between the four of us.
Absolutely. I mean, like I say, me and my brother are as different as two men could
He's,
be from the same woman and
yep,
man.
yep.
So yeah, I understand that. But we get on. We get on fine, but we are totally, totally different. Yeah. And so, where would that take us, Steve? That was 42 or
So
43?
yeah, that's kind of late 30s, and then we're into the early 40s. I'm back. We're back in the UK.
Yeah.
I came back to an internal IT job,
Uh-huh.
and then after managing a small team for 2-3 years, Hewlett Packard went through a divestiture. They divested Agilent, and they wanted people to work on splitting the IT systems and tools and services and so on, so that both companies had internal IT departments. I volunteered, and for me that was a bit of a risk because there was no job guaranteed at the end of it.
Right.
But it was really, really interesting and really enjoyable. What the main thing I learned from that was if you see something that looks interesting,
Yeah.
and again that curiosity,
Yes.
go for it,
I was going
and
to bring that up.
just trust that things will work out fine afterwards.
Yeah.
I still have a job. I had a job in HP for a lot of years after that, and
Yes.
the experience served me really well.
Yeah. And I guess that links right back to what I've picked up all through what you've said, Steve, is that you are you'll take a risk, but you're fairly confident you're going to get something from it anyway. So, it's not a huge risk. Do you do a lot of planning for it, these changes?
Um, I mean, I talk them through with my wife. We might sit down and do a pros and cons, and
Right.
where might this go and what might go wrong and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. End of the day, it tends to be kind of half kind of considered thought and half does it feel right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It
So there's a mix of both.
doesn't seem to have done too badly so far.
Yeah, so far,
Yeah.
late 50s and still going.
Well, let's go up towards your late 40s, 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Story and lessons.
So late 40s, 50s. Probably, I went from doing that divestiture project into project and program management. That got me into the outsourcing part of HP, where HP was doing IT for other companies.
Yeah.
As a project manager, a transformation program manager, and so on. And then that meant lots of travel, which was a great way to see Italy, Finland, and a few other places in the world. But eventually, with my daughter's birth, proved to be just a bit too much, and so I switched over to a back office role doing business administration.
Yeah. Yeah. Through all that, were you in management then, Steve? Were you in a management position?
I was in a management position when we came back to the UK in
Yes.
93, but 95, 96, when I did the when we came back to the UK in 97.
Yeah.
But when we get to about the year 2000, when I went to the divestiture project, I was doing program management rather than people management. So management of objectives and deliverables rather than individuals.
Yeah. So you were, for a period of time, you were in charge of people.
I was, yeah.
Yeah. How did you find that?
I have to say, not my favorite role, not my favorite job.
Yeah.
I mean, I love working with people. I like getting things done, but being responsible just for the people management, not something I particularly enjoyed. And to be honest, I've not chased those kind of roles ever since. So having tried it and worked out that probably wasn't for me, I've stayed on the deliverables and projects and that side of things.
Now, that's brought up for me. Can we go right back, Steve? Can we go right back?
Yep. Go on then.
How were you at school? How did you approach school and teachers?
When you say how did I approach school and teachers, what
authority? Were you okay with authority?
Yeah, absolutely fine with authority. And in fact, I was somebody that always tried to be the best in the class.
Right. Yeah.
Get the top marks.
Yes. Yeah.
And if I could go a step further than what the teacher was taught or wanted the class to get to, I would do that.
Interesting. And any of that go back to your parents at all? The influence of your parents?
Quite possibly my mother. We've already talked about her being very determined.
Yes.
So that may have come from her.
Right. Great. Now it's just interesting how you got on with the teachers. So you no problems with the teachers, or actually the question I'm dying to ask now then is, did you ever feel that you knew more than the teachers?
No.
No,
I never did.
No.
I mean, it was really just wanting to do the best that I could and get, if you like, the highest marks that I could, the top marks. So it wasn't a case of I'm better than the teachers. It was just a case of, being seen to be the best in the class.
Yes. And what sort of school was it? Were comprehensives in by
comprehensives?
Then?
Yeah, comprehensives.
Yeah.
So regular primary school and comprehensives, no grammar schools or anything like that.
No.
No.
I mean, I was a supply teacher, Steve, so I take my hat off to you, because I started supply teaching in 84. Or was it? No, 82. I started, and I'd come back to the family. I'd say, it's been pretty good today. I've got a class of 30. And there's two are a little bit naughty, but I've enjoyed it. 87, I came in, I said, I've got two kids that are really but the rest of it, it was like a jungle. It was like the first 20 minutes were just trying to get some kind of stability in the class.
My
And I
wife is
hated it.
my wife is a teacher,
Right.
and she regularly tells stories about children that are disrupting the class,
Yeah.
or that they're not really engaged in the lessons. And
No.
I mean, if I look at some of the things she does to provide some engagement for the children, I mean, she's hugely creative.
Right.
I mean, story about my wife. When she was interviewing for one of her teaching roles, they asked her to teach a lesson. So a bit
Yes.
like supply teaching.
Yes.
She took a little bag of buttons into the class with her. She gave each child a button and asked the child to write the story of that button.
Right.
Where did it come from?
Yeah.
What was the person doing when the button got lost?
Yeah.
How's the button going to get reunited with and it's that kind of stuff that it
Yes.
helps to engage children, and
Yeah.
helps from a discipline and avoiding the jungle perspective.
That's right.
Yeah.
Does she teach a range of lessons, or?
She is a year 6 teacher, which in UK or child terms is age 10 to 11.
Right.
And it's the final year before the children go to big school.
Yes. Yeah, it was the year that finished me.
It is quite a tough year. Yeah.
I was a supply teaching at a school of 10, 11-year-olds. I was on playground duty, and in the corner of the playground, I saw a lad take a boy by the shoulders, take him down to the floor while his mate ran up and kicked him in the back. Oof. So he was running back to do it again. So I ran over and hauled the lad off him, and I took the victim away. An hour later, I was called into the headmistress' office. I'd put my hands on a pupil. And
but what are you going to do in that situation?
She said, you should have spoken to him. I walked out of school that day, and that's the last supply teaching job I ever did. There's no way I would have done exactly the same again next time. So,
whether you've been in school, out of school, walking past a shopping, if someone's getting injured or beaten up, the natural inclination is to step in and help.
That's it. Well, that was then. So we're coming up to the final year, Steve. So the last 4 or 5 years.
So I actually want to go back 10 years, because 2010 was when I developed my first serious spreadsheet, a point of sale solution for my brother, who's he runs multiple businesses, but this was for his plumbing merchants business in Bristol. Again, I did the spreadsheet in my spare time. I didn't get any money for it. He has been really good to me ever since, because he's recognized the value of what I've provided, and he's still in his business is using that spreadsheet even today.
Right.
So it's a solution that's lasted and has stood the test of time. And for me, that just proved that I had the ability and was able to produce spreadsheets that others would really, really find useful, even small businesses and business managers and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I guess more of the same, really. In the last kind of 10 years of my life, I've had a number of roles. I've kept in or stayed inside the business administration side. And I guess for me, what I remember most about those last 10 years in work, aside from all the family stuff and children growing up and leaving home and university and that kind of thing, in work, I just remember that anytime I was faced with something that I thought I'd have to do over and over again, and that was taking a lot of time or a lot of effort, I would build myself a little tool to make it quicker, faster, easier. And each time I then went back to use the tool, I'd be looking at how can I make this quicker still? Can I make this easier still? And so on. So kind of developing the spreadsheets. And that for me was the most enjoyable part of what I've done in the last 10 years. Not necessarily the part that earned me money, but the part that I've most enjoyed doing, which is where my current business comes from.
Of course, we'll come back to that just a little bit. But I take it, this is the time when the son and daughter left home.
So my son's 26.
Yeah.
He went to university. So 18 to 21, he was still kind of living with us, living at uni. He went to High Wycombe, not too far away.
Okay.
He has now moved out, living with his girlfriend.
Yes.
Again in High Wycombe. They're both police officers, which is a vocation to be admired based on some of the stories that he tells me.
Absolutely.
My daughter, she's 20. So last couple of years, she's been at university in Birmingham, Aston University. She's thoroughly enjoying it, and she's just about to go on her third year, a placement year in London this academic year coming. So from September onwards.
And the difference between when they were there and when they've left the nest, how is that?
It's very quiet.
Right. Yeah.
Things tend to stay where we put them. We have a full range of cups and glasses in the cupboard.
Yeah.
But these days, with things like FaceTime and so on, we probably talk to them more than we did when they were living with us. Which is a strange thing to say, but
absolutely.
It's, you get on FaceTime and you're there face to face and talking.
Yeah.
Whereas when they were living here, they'd be off in a room somewhere else playing a Xbox or a game like that, or out with their friends, or upstairs in their bedroom. We wouldn't see them all evening.
Right. No, I agree. Same with mine. Now, just over your right shoulder, Steve, I think you're right. Is that a bookshelf behind you, or is it a green screen?
It's a bookshelf behind me.
What sort of books do you read?
So if I want to read fiction, I read science fiction.
Right.
Or science fantasy. Those are my favorites. Occasionally a murder mystery.
Yeah.
The books on this side, they are running and computer programming.
Yeah.
So those are my books. The books on this side are my wife's books.
Right.
To do with teaching, stories, things like that.
Interesting. And the running, what sort of, how did you get into it, and what sort of distances?
So when we returned to the UK in 97, 98 onwards, some went to school. We got to know some of the other parents. One or two of those played squash. So I took up squash. Used to play squash once a week.
Right.
And then as I approached 50, I realized that I was finding it harder and harder to get around the squash court. So I started running to stay fit for squash.
Right.
And as I've gotten older, I can no longer play squash. So the running has taken over.
Yeah.
So I've been running since I was 50. I have completed 6 marathons.
Right.
I've completed 2 of those under 4 hours.
Brilliant. Yes.
And I've enjoyed it so much that last year I was supposed to start my certification in running fitness, which is an England athletics qualification that will allow me to coach other runners.
I wondered. Yes.
COVID got in the way, and unfortunately, I'm still not started on that certification, and I'm currently booked in to start that in July of this year, finishing in October.
Well, my first thought there was you'd probably be ideal, Steve, because your attention to detail.
There's attention to detail. There's knowing the theory. There's knowing what works and what doesn't work. But there's also a lot of people interaction.
Absolutely.
And on a one-to-one basis, I really enjoy that. Just working with somebody else and seeing them start to understand how their body's working and what they've got to do.
Yeah.
Really looking forward to that.
And was part of that training, did you go into anatomy, physiology, and the movement of muscles? Yep.
Stretching, mobility, the way that your biochemistry works.
Yes.
So how your body generates energy.
Yes.
How when you get to a certain point, if you go any faster, you're going to be burning through the stored energy you've got. So you've got to slow down.
Right.
So there's all sorts of stuff that I've listened to and read up on.
Yeah, I mean, sports played a part of my life ever since my father was a PT sort of fanatic.
Mm-hmm.
But about 20 years ago, my body had broken down. I've been in contact sports all the time.
Okay.
And I found Tai Chi. and that's
Yeah.
been the sport ever since. And I'm probably more flexible now than I was in my 30s.
It is amazing. I mean, every now and then, I don't do too much stretching and mobility, and I ought to, but every now and then I'll find that, you know, I'm kind of got a really stiff shoulder, or can't quite move my neck and so
Yeah.
on. 5 or 10 minutes in some yin yoga, which is like the slow
Right.
stretching type of yoga, and it fixes it.
Yeah. It's there. It's definitely got a benefit. I call it, I had a company called Balance Health and Fitness,
Mhm.
because I was able to balance circuit training, which I taught quite a lot. There was the sports fitness. I was a semi-pro football coach, but then I picked up the Tai Chi. So I've got some private clients, and they can either have an hour of eyeballs out,
Mhm.
sweat in buckets. They can have an hour of Tai Chi.
Yeah.
I also picked up what's called shiatsu massage.
Massage. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now they could have 20 minutes of body work, press up, sit up, squats, whatever,
Mhm.
20 minutes of Tai Chi, and finish off with a massage. So
Nice. Yep.
that's where experience has brought me. And I mean, have you ever looked at the massage side of things?
I've looked into it. I've had massages,
Yeah.
not just your kind of regular massage, but
No.
also the deep
Yeah.
massage, the sports massage type stuff. So
Yeah.
I know about releasing pressure points or
Yeah.
acting on pressure points. I know about mobility and so on, but
Right.
personally speaking, it's not something that I'd want to be doing to other people.
No. Okay. Okay, that's fine. So we're coming up towards the end, Steve. And thank you for being one of the guests. How can people get in touch with you? What platforms are you on?
So I'm on Facebook as Steve Happy Spreadsheets Bateman.
Uh-huh.
And that's no relation to the other Steve Bateman that's
Right.
on Facebook and doesn't want anything to do with spreadsheets to appear in his timeline.
That is a problem, isn't it? That is a problem.
It's a problem more for my family and friends. They
Right.
get a bit fed up with seeing posts about spreadsheets, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn
Uh-huh.
as Steve Bateman.
Yes.
And if you search for Steve Bateman, I think one of the first that comes up talks about happy spreadsheets. So that's me.
Yes.
There are company pages on both. I've also got a Happy Spreadsheets Facebook group
Uh-huh.
where I post regularly, you know, hints and tips, how to be more effective,
Right.
some of the new features that are coming in, and how to use those to save time.
Great. Great. And I think we met through networking, didn't we, Steve? So
We did.
how are you finding networking?
I am really enjoying it. Since redundancy last September, I found networking in January, and the folk that I've met through networking have become my work colleagues.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That's all we can ask, really, isn't it, at these times?
Yep. Yep.
And do you think I'm just wondering whether that's been easier over Zoom than meeting in person?
It has because particularly with one of the networks I'm a member of, they run, I don't know, upwards of 30 or 40 meetings a week.
Yeah.
And you can zoom into any of them.
Yes.
Wherever they are, they're all virtual meetings. It's not like I have to travel to
No.
networking meetings, which might take up a half day or a whole day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Final question, Steve, the future.
Yep.
Where do you see it going?
Well, I am thoroughly enjoying my Happy Spreadsheets business right now. I can imagine doing that for the next 5 or 10 years. Not to the point where, you know, I'm earning hundreds of thousands a year, but to the point where I'm earning enough to look after myself and my wife.
Yes.
I am going to certify as a running coach later this year, determined to do that.
Yeah.
So I can imagine having a few running clients. My wife would love to give up teaching.
Yes.
So at the point where she can do that, she's going to come work with me for a couple of days a week on the business, and then 2 or 3 days doing her own thing.
Okay.
And then, of course, it's seeing what happens to our children.
Sure.
And potentially, you know, somewhere in the next few years, grandchildren.
Aye, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Steve. It's been a real pleasure talking. Don't go as soon as I click off. We'll spend a couple of minutes together.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I want to thank you for being a guest, and this will go up on LinkedIn and all the channels after I've sent it to you for your okay.
Okay, sounds good. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks very much, Steve. You take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. See you soon.